Now this is an exciting day because it's a new land out here and we get to put new mock scrape. We've already started on our food plots. That's priority number one. And the food plots are determined by our access. The two go hand in hand. It's, you know, what's more important, the access or the food plots? It's kind of, you can't have one without the other to me. And then that determines stand locations. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're going to add a stand back here on an oak tree. We talked about that in a previous video. So that's right back there. And once those stands are determined, we need to clear our shooting lanes pretty quick. I'll do that over the next week or two. It's end of May, early June. Great time to clear because the deer won't notice them by the time the hunting season rolls around. If you're clearing shooting lanes in September, those mature bucks don't like it. So within the steps of purchasing new land and the priorities of food plot, access, stand locations, that next thing that happens is we're adding those mock scrapes by these stand locations. We expect to shoot bucks in the fall. And when we do that, we're placing a camera on it, and then that's gonna let me know how these bucks are moving through here, even if there's only a couple pictures a month. I don't expect this area to be a hot spot of mature buck activity, but I do expect when they come through here that they will hit the mock scrape, leave their scent, their preorbital gland scent on that vine. And I'm gonna go through the steps that we're going to take to create this. You know, we're used to, we put this mock scrape out, we're getting deer using it within days. And so we're gonna see how that works here. And I think it'll of course work really well. We've done this over many properties of my own personal and then hundreds of my client properties too. So it's something that does work. We'll go through these steps. And I'm just gonna talk about the basics right here. We have the stand over there. I always talk about I want to be able to have that mock scrape within shooting distance of the stand. It's kind of like having a water hole. If you put it away from a bow stand, you're actually hurting yourself because you're drawing deer away from your bow stand to go to a water hole you can't shoot at. It's the same with a mock scrape. I like these within shooting distance, so the base of that big oak back there is only about 22, 25 yards away at most. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hang a mock scrape from this vine. We're going to hang a licking branch from that vine. That licking branch, we're gonna go here in a second. We're gonna go find a good vine here in the woods. We'll cut that vine down. I want that vine, you know, if that vine is hanging from a line going between two trees and we're hanging that licking branch down, then I like more like a 6 or 7 foot vine or branch. And we're gonna use a vine in this case. What's very important is the bottom of that vine is waist level. So here we're tying it to a branch right up here. And I only need about a foot of rope to have a 5 or 6 foot vine. The vine actually in the licking branch extends up into that branch. And so to me, it's natural to deer. It's just a branch hanging down. They're going to rub it. As opposed to a line between two trees over a big trail, then I've seen people use a 1 foot long or 2 foot long vine or mock scrape branch, licking branch. And it just doesn't look natural. It doesn't look natural to deer. And it's kind of like, you know, a big buck comes into a food plot that's rimmed with piles of logs and debris from creating that food plot in hardwoods. They don't like it. They're just something out of place. And kind of imagine to them, there's just branch hanging down on a line. It doesn't look natural. So I tend to go with a longer piece of vine or branch at that point, 7, 8 foot long even. In this case, we have this branch. It's only about 8 feet in the air. So I'm gonna use about a foot of line and then that'll give us the right amount. Whereas if I was going up a lot higher, sometimes we throw a rope over a branch if it's up high. You definitely want to let that vine or licking branch hang and move. You don't want it tied directly to a branch, directly to line, because then it makes the mock vine scrape too stiff and the deer are going to break it. So you don't want to do that. You always also only want one. They rarely fail. We had a couple fail last year out of 20. So they don't fail very often, meaning a buck breaks it or something. And a lot of times they still use it, especially if it's established. You don't want multiple licking branches here. More is not better. You're dividing out the amount of scent. Bucks don't sit here and leave their scent on 10 licking branches in a row. They just don't have that much time. They're efficient creatures. So we hang one licking branch, it collects 100% of the scent in this area. And when you hang it from a line where it can freely swing, then it lasts. We have a little work to do here. For one, this tree is in the way right here. You want, when that mock scrape is established, you want that buck to be able to rotate all the way around, not hit his rear end on another tree, a brush pile. It's just hanging down by itself. This is a connection, the intersection of trails. We have a trail going down here, logging trail. We have this logging trail going along the top. A lot of rubs and scrapes out at the end here. So this is a great spot, and we're gonna have that stand that we have great access from down the hill over here. So when I put this mock scrape here, I'm gonna clear out a 3 to 4 foot diameter pad. We have the rake in the Kubota over there. We'll clean that out. That's more of a calling card. Rarely do bucks actually make a scrape when they're using it during the entire year. And it also includes does and fawns that use that almost on a daily basis. They really only make an actual scrape where they're pawing the ground. They're usually only doing that, I'd say 2-3 weeks total out of the entire year, maybe 4 weeks. Sometimes that kicks back in the secondary rut, maybe even in early January during a third rut. But you know, a lot of times people say, well, they're not visiting the scrapes, you know, the rut's on. But what we see a little bit different. We see them still hitting the scrapes. They're just not taking the time to actually make the scrape. They're just leaving their preorbital gland scent on that branch. You know, it's crazy. There's people out there, and I'm not making fun of you because this is kind of the industry, but there are people using urine on a mock scrape and allowing that urine to fall on the branch. Folks, deer do not pee upward and spray it on that branch. Instead, when they do urinate, it is on that scrape area, and we find most of the time they don't. And even when they are, most of the time they'll come in and they'll actually walk right to that branch and leave their scent on the branch. And then a lot of times, even during the rut, they're not actually making a scrape. And so you'd look at that scrape and say, oh, they didn't even touch it, when they've been leaving their preorbital gland scent on it every day. We learned that for many years by just almost all of our mock scrapes have a camera directly on them, and that's what we're going to do here, and we'll show that too. But very critical. It's interesting. I believe those bucks almost look at that mock scrape as something sacred. And what I mean by that is we have pictures of some pretty large bucks, older bucks. Kermit last year that I shot, we have a clip where he comes in. We use it often. You might not notice this, but he already left his preorbital gland scent on the scrape. You can see it moving. When he walks away, he knows exactly how wide his rack is, and he actually pushes his rack around the scrape so he doesn't touch the licking branch. That licking branch to them is sacred. I think sometimes it flips around where they're aggressive towards it and they try to break, or they break it in half, but the majority of the time they're very sensitive to that. They just left their scent on it. There's a lot of other scent from all other deer, every other deer that's walked by. So pretty critical, and you can see how they protect that licking branch and how important it is to them. And in that case, when Kermit came in, he never actually made a scrape, and that was just a couple days before I shot him. So it was right during that pre-rut time. He used it, he left his scent. They rarely actually make that actual scrape on the ground, but that's very important. I feel once we make this right here, that soil, we urinate on it ourselves sometimes, but I don't even think that's critical. It's making that big dirt pad. They smell that earth, and then they'll come in and work this, even though they're probably not going to make the scrape. Now, what we're using is a vine. I think Dylan is Virginia creeper vine, and sometimes there's old grapevines, but we're looking for a 3/4 inch to 1 inch in diameter. We've had success up to 1 1/4 inch. But what's important though is once you get that right diameter, you have to have that right length. We're gonna use a 5 or 6 foot piece of vine right here. A lot of times I'll find where that vine has a little crook in it, a little 90-degree turn, and that's where I'll cut it so that I can have something to tie onto. And then in this case, I'm tying to this branch up here. Now, alternatives for that, not everyone has vines in the area. We happen to have one right over here. We already pre-scouted it just 30 yards away. When we walk in, you have to see, we're gonna walk over there, there's a fawn, right? And Dylan saw a fawn, and we walked right next to it. I walked by it twice, didn't see it. And I'm good thing it wasn't a copperhead or a rattlesnake. I don't think we have too many of those around here, but it would have got me, probably. But it's real close. We'll look at that, check it out when we're on the way in. White oak branches are great. You see a lot of those oak branches that are hanging out, even apple branches, but jack pine up north, they love to rub and scrape under jack pine. Hemlock is not a bad one. Aspen branches or poplar branches, anything that they typically would rub or scrape anyways, scrape under, rub on, then that typically is good material to use, something native to your area. I've seen a lot of people that have cut vines down around their home in the southern portion of the state, and then they're going up and using those up north in locations that don't have vines, and they're doing actually really well. It's very natural. Don't ever use rope, don't ever use ribbon. It's cool to talk about that stuff, and it's more gimmicky. I've seen 500 ropes hanging on 200 acres, and barely any of them were touched in any way. You know, there was an oversaturation, that was a problem too, but at the same time, they never work as good as something natural. The only unnatural thing we're using is the actual rope to hold the vine, to hold that vertical branch to a rope above or to a branch. Other than that, think about it. The best mock scrape scent that you could put on there for that preorbital gland set. I'll bet my 20, 30 deer that are coming in and leaving their scent to your whatever concoction of scent, dust, spray, or gel, that you're putting on a mock scrape, how can that possibly compete with the natural scent from deer that are hitting it every single day? Other than you could likely even cover up that natural scent even if deer were using it. And I think the best mock scrape scent is natural, and the best mock scrape vertical licking branch is something natural. Keep it natural. Natural is best. And we're going to, and that's why you have to. If you look at a lot of scrapes completely flat here, we're putting the bottom of that licking branch about waist high. If we were doing a traditional licking branch, it would be about chest high. Bucks need that leverage so they can push against that about face level. Here, they're putting their scent on it, and that's why you need the weight of the longer branch so they can actually rub their preorbital gland scent on it. And then at the same time, we want it to look natural, like it's just a limb hanging down. We want everything clear around it so a buck can completely move around it. I see a lot of scrapes that are on elevation changes, on a slant. It's 1.5 feet away from a tree, and it's the wrong material, it's the wrong size. They're using some kind of commercial scent that's actually diluting and diminishing the value of that licking branch as it relates to natural movement and natural scent left on that branch. So there's a lot of reasons. Someone will say a mock scrape's not working, and of course you have to have the deer there. If there's no deer there, it's not going to work either. So you know, you need some few ingredients, and they're really black and white. And you know, I look at these on a daily basis just about, and we see what works, what doesn't. I've been doing that since the mid-2000s, and that's the best recipe that I've come up with so far. We're gonna go in the woods over here. I'm gonna cut a vine out, I'm gonna come back, clean this area up, we'll hang it, we'll show you these steps along the way, but I really wanna emphasize to follow these ingredients to the T, and you'll be successful going into this fall and throughout the summer. Great place to start your trail cameras in June. We'll talk about that in our deer chore list for June. And we'll probably have some other mock scrapes. We have a video coming out for how many cameras you have on a property. And when you have mock scrapes like this, it makes your trail cam program a lot more definitive and successful because you have highly defined use of that mock scrape. The bucks from this area, 40, 50 yards away, will center on this location. And so you eliminate a lot of random movement. And when you're tying that within food plots, within bedding areas on your land, then it's hard not to be successful. And you'll find the number of trail cameras that you need decreases drastically as the amount of definition and when you actually define those movements on your land and you take the randomness out. If you have random movements, no food plots, no mock scrapes, you're gonna need a lot of trail cameras. I would say to get the same level of buck intel that we're gonna get with just this one in this area within 100 yards, if you didn't have the mock scrape, if we didn't have the food plots, if we weren't capitalizing on these defined movements, instead of one camera in this location, we need 5 or 8 just in a 10-yard or a 10-acre area just to know exactly what's here because everything's just random. Think about that as it relates to how you hunt. We don't want random in front of our tree stands. We want defined use. We want defined use on the land. That's what I do. It doesn't matter if I'm scouting it on public land or if I'm defining that on private land. It has to be defined. And if we have a high percentage of the bucks hitting this mock scrape and we have a stand right there, that speaks very well for the potential level of success for that stand location. And that's why it worked so well with Kermit last year. And him using that mock scrape, shot him. Like from that picture, I shot him within 10 yards of that location. The stand's actually looking from about 25 yards right at that scrape. And so that was, I'd seen him on trail camera another night, but that's where we need, you know, that definition, and this is a big part of that. Let's walk in here and check out this fawn that we're gonna walk by too. Pretty cool though. So the vine's right over here. This one I'd consider just a little bit too small. Looks like more about a 1/2 inch diameter. And really, if you use too big, they're not gonna use it. It's not as natural for what they want. You know, 1.5 inches in diameter, 2 inches. But at the same time, if it's too small, it's going to break. So I found the 3/4 inch to 1 inch, the perfect sweet spot. And there's one right over here. It looks like to be a great size. Now, when you're picking vines, make sure leaves of 3, let it be. So there's a lot of poison ivy vines out there. They typically tend to be a lot skinnier. But even if you're cutting these out, really pay attention because a lot of times you'll have that thin vine going up the tree You don't notice there's any leaves on it. You don't notice it. You rub up against that vine or you cut it, touch it. And I think a lot of people get poison ivy just from walking by a vine on a tree. They're looking at leaves or paying attention down by their boots and jeans and pants, but really pay attention to those vines on trees. If there's 3 leaves, really avoid it. But most of the time you can see, like this vine over here is not a poison ivy vine. And I'm looking at that this one is actually too small, or this one's just right. And if you look at, I'm seeing a nice little knob right here. So I'm gonna cut this one right here in this location. And then that's the same right down here. I like a little curve in the, seems like it's natural as opposed to just a straight stick hanging down. So you can see this one's about perfect right here. It's about 6 foot, maybe slightly over 6 foot. I'm about 5'9", so you can kind of see reference wise, you know, pretty good size. I would say that we'll probably use this end right here for the licking branch. And now folks, you don't have to worry about using gloves and worrying about leaving your scent on these vines. It's crazy how we'll touch this, I'll touch it right now, and it'll be very interesting. We'll have deer use this within days. This scent really doesn't matter too much here. And that can be even applied to your trail cameras. People are using gloves for their trail cameras. That means if deer are avoiding those trail cameras, that's why they're using gloves. They think they're hiding their scent. There's got to be other problems. Usually the trail camera's not hidden enough. They're repeatedly using it. The deer are smelling their tracks going to the tree. They're going up and they're smelling that trail camera. The trail camera is not the problem. It's the use around that area. If you leave scent even on a trail camera, it's not going to linger for very long. Even if it lingers for a few hours, it's not going to affect deer. Should be off to the side, hidden enough, and we'll show you what we're doing here. But that'll be perfect. We're going to, a lot of times they are dripping when they're fresh off the end. You can see it coming out right there. That might be a survival type thing. I don't know if that's how you can get some moisture out, but there's a lot of moisture in these vines, and we're going to tie that right here. We left a little bit of that knob in that little corner, so we're going to tie right there, and this will hang about this high. Something we're also doing is I'm also cutting the branches off past where I'm hanging this from. I want that branch to be very stiff. If you have a lot of leaves on there's a couple things that happen. For one, a lot of those leaves are sagging down that branch. You can expect as you get into fall and those leaves are gone, the scrape will rise. We've had some that were that perfect height and then all of a sudden they're neck high. I don't like them to be that high because the leaves came down. So here I'm going to cut off the remaining so that branch is sticking out is very stiff. And that way it's also not blowing around in the wind as much. We don't get a lot of false triggers, but we do when it's on a smaller branch with leaves. We're up on a ridge here that's blowing around a lot, so I'm taking the leaves off, the branches off. That'll make sure that this is going to stay a lot straighter and I'm not going to get a lot of false images. So now that we have this piece right here, this is like the perfect piece. Dylan, what do you think? It's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. Dylan likes sometimes it'd be like 1.25 inches. We had one in Coon Valley that lasted for a few years, and it just broke last year, and it was the weirdest thing because that thing literally was 1.25 inch diameter, and where it broke was probably 8 feet off the ground. So it's not something we just jump up and replace. We're gonna have to replace the whole vine. I don't know how it got broke that high up. The only reason that sometimes these bucks come in and stand up, and then they come down hard. It's twisted in their antlers. That could have happened, something like that, but pretty weird that broke because we replaced one last year or the year before, been there since 2014. So we usually get several years of use out of these. And a lot of times you can replace them during the season too, you know, bring another branch in there. I've even purchased hose clamps before so that if this was broke right here, I could just add another one and hose clamp it to the other one. Don't have to do anything else. And but let's take this back. We'll set it up, show you guys how it's done. We'll leave it looking nice and fresh and clean. We're gonna have a cell camera next to the cell camera on it. And I don't know, Dylan, what's the bet? You think under or over 2 days that they'll use it?
Oh, definitely under 2 days. That fawn will be on there in an hour.
I'm surprised that fawn's still there. So you just want to pick those things up and you know, play with them a little bit. Don't. they're best just to leave them alone and look at them. And it's pretty crazy. That has to be fresh. I mean, it's got to be within a few days, not a week. Especially you find they'll sit tight like that, which is so important. You could see when we walked by the next time after we'd already taken a couple pictures and Dylan had taken a little video of it. It was just flat. They'll flatten out, and so it had its neck way out, just flattens down on the ground. That's their way of hiding, and so pretty cool to see that. And I wasn't surprised if that fawn would use it at some point. We had fawns. If you look up fawns dancing on scrapes on the YouTube video from years ago, that mock scrape was only about 4 or 5 days old. There'd already been a lot of deer on it, and those little fawns that were using it, this was early July, and they were just, can you imagine their excitement when they smell 10 other deer on the end of this? It doesn't look like they know how to process it or what to do. They just keep going back. They're flicking their tail because they're curious, but wouldn't be surprised if that fawn right up there uses this within a month or two too. So let's go and get this made and we'll show it to you. And so you can see this isn't rocket science. I'm putting this branch up there where we're going to hang it from until I need about 6 or 8 inches of rope. So when I take that down, cut off these limbs, it's going to rise up a little bit. I'll probably use a foot of rope, and if anything, we'll just cut the bottom of the vine just a little bit more. But bottom line is, we'll pull that branch down, tie it on, get rid of some of these leaves out in the end, and then we have some cleanup work to do. Now, part of what I'm doing here too is we're going to put a camera right here. So part of cleanup is we need to make the scrape area, open it up, but we need to clean this up for the camera. We're hiding that camera right back here. It's going to be really nice because I can put that camera on this tree. I can shine it down. We have this tree right next to it. We have some branches and shrubs right here. So that camera is going to be very hidden. The deer will be a non-issue. They won't ever look at it, know it's there. And if they do look at it, it'll just be they happen to be looking past it. So part of what I'm doing when I'm clearing this is I just want to make sure the camera has enough room. And so it doesn't matter if I'm hanging a trail camera anywhere. I want to make sure that I don't have limbs that could possibly blow in front of it and keep triggering that off. So you have to really clear out a big area during the summer. Even little leaves like this, they can be blowing over this way. If that camera's right here, it's just too close, so it might set it off. Movement. We had some where birds land on those branches or whatever, but I want everything clean around it, but I still want that cover. So I still want this here. I want some limbs over here, as long as they're not going to blow in front of the camera. But I want that cover from the side. We have lots of branches right here. So the side profile is hidden. We're going to put that camera up here and point it down. So we're putting it at about head level. And that's really important to hide your cameras. And then we're getting rid of all of these other branches. In almost every stand location that I have a mock scrape. What a waste not to be able to shoot at least within close proximity to it when a buck comes in. A buck can't come into this without us getting a shot, and that's the most critical thing. I see a lot of times people say, well, mock scrape's not working. Well, it's not on a flat surface. They didn't clean the area around it. There's something large, too close to it. And certainly if you put a camera that's right in their face, they don't like that. So many times people get one picture of a big buck and then that's it. And that's the only picture they get for the rest of the year because they saw the camera. So translate that even, you look at that little box that's scaring mature bucks. Well, think about a big blind that you're putting out. That's why we hide our rednecks, put them off to the side and go through great pains to do that. So we're not spooking out an area just like a trail cam can spook out a good mock scrape. So there's always a reason why these mock scrapes don't work, but boy, 90% of the people out there do it right, and it's a great draw. You know, the crazy thing about this is that just by experience, quite possibly, this mock scrape could be hanging here for the next 5 years. So we hang it this one time and then kind of go from there. You can see how it's fairly natural looking. It's up into the branches a little bit. Deer will have no aversion to this in any way. A little bit low right now, but I think I'll keep it at that and see what happens. I don't think that's too bad. Tell us there's some upper branches there with leaves. When those come up, I can see this lifting up just a little bit. But pretty stiff. We have branches all around it. Sometimes when they hit this, they hit branches up here, it seems more natural. But notice how, you know, other than getting a camera on here, really the last thing we're doing, and the least, I would say the least important, but important, is we're actually going to make the actual scrape area. That's the last step. We're gonna clean it out, make it look like a good scrape. Again, I'm getting rid of all the woody debris right here, let alone all the litter. And it's not that a buck is scraping over that far. I just don't want him touching it, hitting it. You want it completely free around this area, and it now is. Now you can see in clearing this out, I've not only cleaned the area out for the scrape, but I want bucks to see this from 30 yards away or 30 yards down that way. So we've taken back some of the vegetation here, cleaned out a pretty large dirt patch, and then we're going to, when we leave, I'll spray this portion with just glyphosate. That'll keep this down, keep it open and bare soil. And then now we just need to add the camera. It's always fun putting a fresh exodus out. Now we're all set. You know, we have high expectations for this spot. And you can see I cleared out a lot of brush around here, and one of those reasons I want that buck to feel like he can just hit this and keep going. You never want it back in a little cubby hole where they have to go into a portion surrounded by cover and then come back out. You want them to feel like they can freely move through here. At the same time, we've done a good job to make sure that all these branches from around here are trimmed out so that there's nothing in the way. They'll set off pitchers prematurely because something's moving around all over the place. So, you know, limbs are blowing in the way. So I think we're gonna spray this because I want to get it down to the soil completely. And then we're gonna get out of here. And you know, again, it's May 23rd right now. It'll be interesting to see how soon a deer actually hits this. It'll be really cool to see how long it takes for that fawn that's still over about 20 yards away, how long it takes for that fawn to start hitting this and get used to that on a daily basis. The other cool thing, you have our Exodus cell camera right there. We have the mock vine scrape. And then right behind Dylan right here, I think this is where we were thinking for a water hole right here, right Dylan? Or somewhere around in here. Either right off to the side here, there, or right here. We're starting to get into where we could get a shot from the stand at the water hole right here, so that's critical. And but we'll put these two together. We'll add a water hole later. Mock scrape is the priority. You know, on the other property we bought, we didn't put any water holes in last year because once we have the food plots and access defined, that determines where the tree stands go. Once the tree stands are in place, the access is good, then we're adding mock scrapes, camera, water hole in the future. But once we get to this point, our planning is good and done around this location. We just need to add the stand location. So we'll spray this out on our way out just to make sure we get some glyphosate on there and it stays down. It'll be interesting with the glyphosate, our hands all over that vine, just how soon a deer hits it. Dylan's thinking under 2 days. I'll go over 2. And what's the bet, Dylan?
Beers.
Okay. That's usually the, you know, it's pretty boring. That's about it. So, well, we'll get on out of here. Hopefully we're showing some pictures of how soon this deer hit it by the time you're watching this. And again, we can't wait. This is the first mock scrape on the new land, the new 67 acres that we added to our property in Minnesota. And we have high hopes for this location, let alone this mock scrape. And you can bet we'll bring as much of it to you along the way as we can, all the way through this fall. I'm excited to tell you guys about my latest web class. It's how to plant food plots, how to design your food plot program, and it covers everything. And really, there's 30 videos, over 10 hours, 11 hours of footage, workbook, hats, you know, all that stuff. On top of it, I urge you to check out the link. But I cover 5 main areas: critical food plot concepts, where to plant, how to create, what to plant, and finally how to plant. It takes you through that step by step so you can make your own decisions that apply to you and build a great high quality food plot program this year, whether you have decades of experience or no experience at all.